Hi, all, and welcome to a world of bookish adventures. My name is Shannon.
And I'm Amanda, and we are excited to share with you today's podcast.
First, we'd like to thank those of you who've already written in to share with us either authors that we should look up or they've shared their stories and bookish places that we should check out. We absolutely appreciate you, and we invite listeners to share their ideas and their experiences with us. But today, Amanda is going to be sharing her bookish adventure to the J.P. Morgan Museum and Library in New York. And I cannot wait to hear about this one, Amanda.
Yeah, this was really actually unplanned for me. We were just kind of looking for places we could go before we had to catch our flight, and it was like, hey, this looks neat. And it was actually a really cool experience. So, most people are already familiar with the name JP Morgan, right? Because of the finance company, and then same person founded some other companies like General Motors and so forth. So, what everyone may not already know, but I certainly didn't know, is that in his lifetime, he had just amassed this huge personal collection of rare books, cultural artifacts, music manuscripts, art, just things that are of important cultural and historic value. However, after he died, his son decided that this amazing, just treasure trove of artifacts and art was just too important to just keep it private and keep it hidden away. So he turned it into the public institution that we now call the JP Morgan Library and Museum.
I think that's so amazing. Because, so first of all, I'll admit I didn't even know this was a thing. I've been to New York City several times, but obviously this was not on my radar. So I'm going to have to remember this for next time I go. But I really think it's amazing that the family decided to share this collection with the public and not keep it hidden away or for their own use and stuff like that. And I would venture to guess that the original creators of all the items that are in this collection, like this is exactly what they would have wanted. So I'm just so glad that you got the opportunity to experience those creations.
Oh, definitely. I mean, nobody makes art just so it could be hidden, right? Nobody reads a book just so that it could end up not being read. So I think, this is probably the best thing that could have happened to those things. When you go in, part of the building is actually just a regular public library. So you could go in, get a library card, go up and down the different floors, check out books, whatever. But the other part of the building is this just massive, magnificent looking museum that is in the style of the Italian Renaissance. So, like the art and architecture. If you think about what that might look like, just for people who maybe can't see the pictures on YouTube, like huge high ceilings, multicolored stained glass windows, these really thick marble pillars, paintings on the ceiling that kind of, brings to mind the Sistine Chapel, huge fireplaces, just gigantic, tapestries on the walls, and of course, shelves upon shelves upon shelves of books. So, a lot of the books, the rare ones, they're not part of the library, are actually they're protected behind various types of barriers. So that way visitors can view them and there's not the risk of potentially harming them. No risk of spilling your coffee on them or, kids running around and knocking things over. They're actually protected so that way they last longer.
I love the description that you shared, and it kind of, in some way, reminds me of what I experienced at the Abbey Library in St. Gallen, which I talked about last week. You know, the architecture, the rare books, all these things. And I think it's so great that we have these opportunities, no matter where you are in the world, to experience that. And kind of as Amanda said, for those that are watching on our YouTube channel, you're going to get to see the pictures of what Amanda's talking about. And we'll also share them on our Instagram and TikTok as well.
The pictures, like they don't quite represent it. It's not as magnificent as it would be in person, but they're really cool to look at. The rare books, like that's obviously one of the things that's the biggest draw there. So the rare books that are actually out for display were of all different topics. So there were some on poetry, some on anatomy, some on math. All different topics could be found there, but I think a lot of them were chosen for display because of their illustrations. And the reason why I say that For example, there was a book of the Song of Songs, same one as in the Bible, but this one was written in both Hebrew and English. So both Hebrew and English were depicted in this shining gold metallic paint and illustrations of flames and waves and these like just gorgeous metallic colors that just almost felt like they jumped right off the page and into the room. So, to see something like that, these very careful, paint strokes for each word and each letter of each word was just very beautiful. There were other religious texts on display as well with the same type of incredibly detailed full color illustrations as well as a display of what was labeled J. Pierpont Morgan's finest jeweled binding, which looked like it was meant for a Bible and was intricately decorated with just hundreds, maybe thousands of small gems and depicted almost like a mosaic of the crucifixion as it is described in the Bible.
These ornate books, it kind of gives me the feel, and I know you and I are going to talk about this in a future episode, but when we was in Dublin at the Trinity Library and got to see the Book of Kells and all the ornate lettering and the pictures and the drawings, and to think of the time and effort that it took monks or scholars or whoever did these books to put in that effort into making them, and that we get to see them in today's day and age. I think it's just amazing.
Absolutely. It actually, some of those things did make me think of the Book of Kells and, the detail where, today it's as simple as for some of us, copy, paste, whatever, use Photoshop. And they were painstakingly, one stroke at a time, making these absolute masterpieces on so many of the pages. So it was very beautiful. Something else that was like super interesting. So I used to be a music teacher way back in the day in my past life before I became a social worker, and I still do play music myself. So I was especially interested in the sheet music manuscripts. So, for example, there was a draft of Gustav Mahler's Fifth Symphony, as well as a harp concertino by a different composer. And just looking at these beautiful sheets of paper where, you could see very long, loopy way of how they used to write notes and write the symbols, very different from how things are printed by machine, by in computers nowadays. You just think about how incredible it is that these are the same pages that those composers held in their hands, that they wrote on, that they sweat over. Just the same page that we still get to look at today.
And I think that's one of the things I just love about everything that we're doing is not only, do we get to celebrate books and celebrate travel, but then how our other passions get kind of interwoven with what we're talking about. And I think that's really cool that, you have such a love and appreciation and a passion for music and you used to teach. So, can we segue for just a second? Because I think it would be really cool to find out, what instruments do you play?
Okay. Well, the fair answer is when you get your degree in music education, and I specifically chose instrumental. You have to learn how to play a little bit of everything. So I had classes broken down into woodwind, brass, and strings, but I am better at all of the rest of them. I'm better at woodwinds. So I play proficiently um, flute and saxophone, and my major instrument was clarinet. So, I had to learn brass and strings enough to be able to teach students, but would I be able to keep up with anybody in, I don't even want to say a professional orchestra. Would I be able to keep up with your average high school student? Probably not. But I knew enough to be able to teach the younger students, and obviously with the flute, saxophone, and clarinet, know enough to comfortably perform on those. So I did actually give private lessons for a little while in addition to teaching in schools.
That is so cool. And it made me, a memory popped into mind. And I don't even know if you remember this, or you probably remember it, but not the instrument. Do you remember when we were out exploring the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee? And we were on Kate's Cove and we stopped at one of the historic church sites that are along Cades Cove, and that gentleman that was playing that older instrument. Do you remember this?
Yes, I still have the pictures in the video. Maybe I can dig them up. We can put them in the YouTube video because I know I must have them somewhere. But I remember we were very lucky. We were there the same time he was, and he was playing Christmas carols at the time.
That's right, that's right. And do you I don't even remember. Do you remember what that instrument was called?
Unfortunately, I don't. I'm gonna have to look up and see. I know I have like photo albums on my computer. Maybe I must have labeled it, but yeah, I do remember that, and it was very, very beautifully done. And the acoustics in the church were just perfect. So that was a beautiful experience for sure.
That really was, and we'll have to I might even have it too. We'll have to look, and if we cannot remember what it was, maybe someone who's listening can tell us what the instrument was, because it was pretty cool. It was really
Yes.
cool. But anyway, okay, enough segueing on the music. Let's get
Yeah.
back to this amazing museum.
Okay, yeah, sure. Another exhibit that was particularly fascinating was on the cuneiform tablets. So, for people who don't already know, cuneiform is an ancient writing system that was developed over 5,000 years ago. So, if you think about how old that is even before Egyptian hieroglyphics. So, it is old, old. It's not an alphabet, not in the same way that English is, where we have each letter or each character, however you want to think about it, represents a sound. Cuneiform is not an alphabet. Each character does not represent a sound, but it represents word. Each character represents words or parts of a word. So there are, depending on which type of cuneiform you're looking at, that system will have 600 to 100, or excuse me, 600 to 1,000 different characters to represent either a part of a word or a whole word. And the word cuneiform actually means wedge shaped. And that comes from, if you think of, they didn't have pens and computers and things 5,000 years ago. They would use wet, like moist clay and tips of reeds to form their characters. So a lot of the parts of the characters are shaped like a wedge. So cuneiform means wedge shaped. And that comes from how they would stamp the reed into the clay to get the outline of the character that they were looking for. So most of the clay that was used for these inscriptions was just shaped into a tablet form. So just square, rectangle, whatever. Which of course could be dropped or broken or whatever, but for their day-to-day type of things was not a problem. However, they did figure out that for writings of greater importance, to take that clay and shape it into a cylinder and write as if they were writing a scroll. So if you can imagine what that looks like, starting at one side, one end of the cylinder, going all the way across, and then going on to your next line, and it's just round instead of going straight down. Any type of writing that was of greater importance would be saved on a cylinder, and the intention of putting it on a cylinder is that it would last longer because the clay would be thicker, heavier, less likely to break, things like that. The largest exhibit of one of those clay cylinders with the cuneiform writing that they have in the museum is called the Clay Foundation Cylinder of King Nebuchadnezzar II. That's a lot of. We're going to put that on the YouTube pictures as well, so you can see it. And it's over 2,000 years old. So clearly, it lasted a long time because when you look at some of the other artifacts, they're pieces of tablets, so we don't get to see the whole thing. That cylinder has lasted over 2,000 years due to the way it was constructed. So it's actually pretty brilliant.
I think it's so amazing when you think of the lack of technology we're talking about. Like when you think of, like you said, today's standards, but what they were able to do. I know, I had referenced the Trinity Library and the Book of Kells earlier. And when you're first going through there and you're learning, how they're making their paper, how they make the dyes, how they do all these things that have lasted to this day, that you can still see these books. It's incredible, because I don't know, you think about the books that we have now with the typeset that you get mass produced and online or any bookstore. You wonder how long will that ink last on that paper, you know what I mean, versus what they could do back then. And like you said, this is over 2,000 years old for some of these items, plus the books that we're seeing. I just think it's incredible.
It truly is because, if we think about we tend to measure our time before Christ and AD. These are things that existed, back in that time of what we call the BC era, right? Like, so these things are just thousands of years old, and to find, these tablets that existed even before hieroglyphics, which up until I learned about cuneiform in this museum, I thought hieroglyphics were the oldest type of writing. So it was just really interesting to see how they did it, and to able to, can't touch it, but to be able to examine it, look at it, and just see, like, wow, they really had this very sophisticated style of documenting what was important to them.
So, Amanda, so I have to ask, you shared that this was kind of a last minute stop before you headed to the airport to head home, which I think is really cool that you were able to kind of fit one more really cool bookish adventure in. How long did you stay there? And like, if someone were going to go, is there like a recommended, kind of plan on this much time to spend at this library?
That is a great question. So I think we were there for about 2 hours and we did not get to see everything. So I would say maybe, 3 to 4 hours to really get to check out all of the art and everything else. Because honestly, I could have spent way more time in the artifact room and just checking out all the different types of tablets. I feel like I could have spent more time there. So I would say to plan for maybe 4 hours. And then if you get through it a little quicker, you get through it a little quicker. But I think first would be a good time.
I'm so excited, and I hope our listeners are excited too. And I'd be curious if any of our listeners have been to the JP Morgan Library Museum. We'd love to see your pictures, or hear your thoughts about what you really liked there.
Definitely. I would always be interested in seeing, like, oh, maybe I missed this, or maybe, someone else had a different perspective, because there's just so many things there, and we obviously can't cover them all in just one episode. So there are just so many more exhibits on display that we don't have time for. But even if you're not able to see us on YouTube, you can go at any time to www.themorgan.org to take a virtual tour, and you can see the books and the artifacts and the artwork through the way they have their virtual tours set up. So you don't even have to leave your home, and you can have this really cool adventure. Feel free to check that out. They do not pay me to say that. I just really think it would be a fun experience.
And I think that's such a great point, that so many of these amazing libraries and museums and all this history have different online options, whether it's a picture and photo gallery, learn about the history, do live virtual tours. Some even have kind of like the live webcam, where you can see what's going on. And I think you're right. I think it's a great way to experience something that maybe you can't jump on a plane to go to New York City to do. And I think it probably could also be great if you're planning, like you're going somewhere, get online, look at what museums and libraries are going to be in the area, take a look at their pictures, see if they have virtual tours, because you could probably help plan your adventures too.
Absolutely. Yeah, the website is actually very helpful and very user friendly.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, all of our listeners. I hope that you will go check it out if you are in New York City, or share your adventures if you've been there. And I'm so thrilled to share that our next podcast, we are going to introduce and interview our first indie author spotlight. That is Hannah James. She is the author of the Air Undeniable series, and she'll be joining us to share about her book and her writing process. And I'm really, really excited about this.
I am too. I think that is going to be a really fun difference between us talking about our adventures and then having her talk about how do we create an adventure just to get this book out there. So that's exciting.
It is exciting. So, on our YouTube and other social media sites, we will put her link and her book link. So, if you want to check her out before she comes on next week, we invite you to do so.
Well, thank you everyone for being a part of our podcast. We cannot wait to connect with you each week. And we invite you to join us on our social media pages, as well as to like and subscribe to us on YouTube, as well as whatever your favorite podcast platform is.
And don't forget to share your own bookish stories with us. Please email us your adventures at awobapodcast@gmail.com. You can also look in our link tree for a form to have a chance to have them shared on one of our podcasts.
Until next time, read more books.
And then go explore. Bye, everyone.